Hi there, I'm Italian Sausage Sunday.
And I'm Chicken Breast Skinless.
Thanks for coming back and watching us here, Simply Worldbuilding. Today we're going to kind of polish up Yothurmiir here, and we've also finally actually written down a handful of objectives for things that we've got to solidify for each of these nations before we move on.
Yeah, in the previous episode about Yothurmiir, we were flailing a little bit more, and so now we've written down at least a handful of things that we want to nail down in the second pass before we dig into the meat. So there might be a little bit of overlapping information as we go through this list, but bear with us. It's going to be a little bit more cohesive. But yeah, so Yothurmiir, our good old dwarven mountainous region. So yeah, we touched on the sort of folklore behind the country itself, but when it comes down to like the actual goings on and more current events and stuff like that, we have a bit of a list here. But I think probably one thing I would want to start on is like actual current events, possibly history, because we were discussing we were going to have a city of golems, and that city of golems was basically going to be built on top of a dead Titan or Leviathan. I'm not sure if we actually nailed that down.
I think... Yeah, it's an interesting point, actually. We didn't. We came up with it before we really decided the Titans were for sure a thing.
Yeah, fair enough, too.
It does kind of fit the vibe, though.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Well, plus it would be a lot more... Because the Leviathans are something that's, like, it's current. They're happening within the world.
For sure,
whereas, like, most of the Titans have perished at this point. And so it would make it also a lot more ancient of a place.
Yep.
And so it could be a little bit more interesting, and that could be even something that's pre the unification of like the two nations coming into Yothurmiir.
So if it's a Titan, what Titan is it?
Well, we were basically going to make like whatever it is that's powering these golems was going to be made out of this Titan.
Yeah.
The first thing that immediately comes to mind is whenever you see like power source, magic power source, it's a crystal. You know what I mean? Like that's just such a common thing. So, and I mean, the Titan of Crystal would also be such a cool moniker as well.
Yes, it would. I also think visually it would make for a pretty sick Leviathan as well, though. Yeah,
true. Well, yeah, but it's going to be... This thing will have perished like long before current history as well. And one kind of visual I was thinking about is like, you know, certain districts of the city being like on top of stuff. And so there might be something like a hand that's like half buried, but like the fingers are still sticking up like this. And so, yeah, like sort of a cool like blue or purple crystal jutting out of the ground like that. And at what is obviously a hand would be such a cool visual, especially if the city was like more properly built around it.
One thing, when we first had that idea that popped into my head that I don't think we'll go with, but is just a really sick visual in general, is like this city that's kind of built into like, or back up against like the side of a mountain, and then is built like within, or at least partially within, like a rib cage, and then there's like a skull kind of hanging over as well, and like that's just in the town.
Honestly, that would be pretty dope, and you could still have like the hands too, because they would like lay at the sides as well, which I think would actually make even more sense, because also if you think of something like laying out like this, like the hands are very far apart. That actually might be a good option to go with. Like, yeah, it's leaned up against the mountain range itself, and so has sort of become like it's just sitting there, not decaying, but like slowly being taken away.
Okay, all right. Well, what if also then, like, the thing that is kind of like centrally in the like rib cage is like the foundry, and then like all the smoke kind of like rises and comes out of like the eye holes and stuff.
Oh, that'd be so cool. Yeah,
pretty sick.
Yeah, exactly. And it also makes it into a bit of a finite resource as well, but I like to think there's still lots left.
Yeah.
It might even be a more recent quote unquote development of actually like using this as a resource.
I think so, yeah.
And maybe it was just sort of revered as some sort of god, and like the city was built into it. But like, yeah, so as such, like it's only semi recently become a resource,
Yeah.
and so now it's starting to get mined.
Okay.
Maybe even that could be a bit of a controversy among people too, like how
Yeah.
much of this is supposed to be mined because it was kind of revered as a god previously. So that could be an interesting idea.
It could also be like a sort of like, maybe not like a taboo, but like, a controversial part around the rest of the nation as well. Like those heathens up in the mountains, like tearing apart these old relics or whatever for what? Some robots?
Yeah,
You know?
yeah. No, that's actually an excellent idea, and I like the idea that it's a bit of there's a bit of tension between like old Yothurmiir and new Yothurmiir, because it was probably revered as a god or some sort, at the very least like a guardian or something like that, because the Titan would have fallen far prior to there being people here. They would have stumbled across this and be like, wow, look at this.
I want to build a factory in that.
Yeah. I want to build my house on its head.
I love smog.
Yeah. But now, since the unification and since it's become a little bit of a different nation, a lot of the elders might remember, back in the... That does bring up, though, exactly how recent we want.
When they started being able to do this?
Yeah, when they started making the golems and stuff like that. Do we want that to be maybe a couple generations back or semi-recently?
Yeah, I think within a few, but more than one.
Yeah. Well, enough so that, like, the elders would be frustrated with this, but that would add a certain amount of tension, so that would be definitely cool. Not something that affects necessarily the whole nation, but it's definitely like a local thing.
Yeah.
Because I don't think this would be a god over top of like all of the dwarves. I think it was just like something locally for sure. So yeah, that definitely nails down like a semi sort of current event or controversy, especially because like I wanted the unification process to be like actually pretty cohesive. Yeah, people like it. Yeah, exactly. So like people were down with it, but this is a little bit of the fallout coming from it, and this is an area of tension. So it's not just like way too smooth and happy-go-lucky. You know what I mean? So that's actually an excellent idea. Yeah. So yeah, the idea of having a gigantic crystal titan is pretty dope. But now the thing is we would need to assign which Titan this was from which god to where exactly it is.
I think personally it feels kind of inherently like magical in some way.
Yeah, definitely.
What do we got? We got the Titan of knowledge and magic.
We also have the Titan of arts and crafts.
Sure, we do. Yeah, that's also pretty good.
Well, just considering the fact that, like, I mean, I think even when we may have been, like, when we were talking about that, I think we discussed this location as well, as, like, there's sort of, these golems aren't just merely something you just kind of cut up of rock, or there are ones that are very simple, but they also take pride in making very intricate and elaborate ones as well.
Into, like, art forms themselves.
Yeah, exactly. And so the idea of that this was sort of a Titan of... art and craft. Arts and crafts would be, I think, a very cool fit, especially because I was kind of picturing a crystal titan as more like you kind of picture it as sort of like a raw gemstone, but what if it wasn't? What if it was actually like really intricate? You know what I mean? Like that could be also a very interesting visual as well. If you have like this gigantic fucking purple crystal, like basically like Greek carving, like that's like very intricate and stuff like that. That could be interesting.
So I think that the Titan of Arts and Crafts fits well here. Visually, do you want it to actually be like glowing crystal-esque? Or do you want it to like, maybe it's just kind of infused in general with this, and so you can chip off a chunk and it'll have like a little bit of this,
maybe it has a bit of
sentience.
Maybe it has like an exterior, and then once you dig deeper, it starts to unveil that.
Ooh, that's pretty dope.
Yeah.
And the reason why the ribs and skull are exposed is because they've already chipped away at that and used them in golems before.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Cool, that's an interesting idea. What does the outside look like exactly? Is it going to look like almost like sort of human?
Yeah, I kind of pictured it being like almost human skeletal.
Well, actually, what if we do like sort of a grayish stone skin and then like the interior is crystal?
Okay. And then
because then it wouldn't look fleshy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It would look like something solid. And then again, when they stumbled upon it, it's like, wow, look at this giant.
Yeah.
It's not like a giant man, and they're like, what the fuck?
No, I don't mean like, like meaty skin guy.
Yeah.
But I want the skeleton to be humanoid. Because
yes.
the rib cage and the skull is too dope.
No, humanoid definitely. But yeah, just when it comes down to like the surface and how it appears, I think it would be cool if it was like, it almost appeared like a marble statue, but then again, once you start to actually get into the quote unquote meat of the actual Titan, it reveals this sort of interesting. Yeah, I'm picturing purple just because purple's such
it feels magical.
Yeah, it's such a magic color, and then we can go with that. So that would be really, really cool as well.
Yeah, that sounds good. Do you think that there's much else that is sort of like a current hot topic here, or
I mean, there's, I feel like almost the elephant in the room of Yothurmiir is the dragon.
For sure.
Is there something to do with the dragon that is going to be stirring up a more political thing? Because we were talking about, it's like, well, it's their duty to keep the dragon asleep, and that's definitely something very, very local to that exact tribe of dwarves that are on the top of the mountain there. But is there something...
Dare I say that because this is the sort of like moment in time that we come into this world, it's the best time possible for it to be maybe a little bit waking up, you know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. We had established that they were using like the sap of this
like
tree.
A moon tree.
Yeah, that was keeping it asleep. Yeah. But it was also a valuable resource because we were saying it's a very valuable magic component. So maybe also like the more Yothurmiir proper government is trying to encroach and take that, or at least like push them to trade it more readily. And they're like, no, we have very little to give on this. Almost all of it needs to go to this sort of ritual, and maybe the people below just don't understand.
Is there only one of these trees that produces this, or could there have been more in the past that have been
I like to think it's it's an entirely unique sort of magical tree, and like, so there's it really does nail down the importance of it. It's not like you could possibly get it from somewhere else, but it would be a little bit harder to get to or something like that. Like, it is such a unique resource that the demand for it is incredible, but like, again, the people who don't understand why they're doing it, and I'm sure even they have sort of forgotten from how ancient it is.
Yeah, they just know that that's the thing. That's what they've been taught.
It's an all costs sort of thing. So the demand for it is increasing, and they're like, we can't give it to you, and so there might be also a little bit of tension there. Yeah, and the risk of if someone does just decide to invade and the ritual just doesn't continue, and then all hell breaks loose, and so that's a walking plot right there.
So do you want there to be the tension of like, oh, there's rumors in weeks past where people have seen a little bit of smoke rising from the mountains or something like that, maybe where like it's that close to the cusp of this becoming a much bigger issue, and so it's kind of a thing that people are talking about?
It might be. I think it would be something that was like, it's causing problems like internally, because like maybe they just recently like started to open up the trade of their little bit of excess that they have, in order to like, it's like, oh, what do we have on top of this mountain? It's not like we have excess food or anything to trade with people, but it's like, we do have this resource. Maybe in the last like 50, 100 years or so, they have started to make trade, but then all of a sudden, like, the wizards from basically around the world, because again, this is such an incredible resource, I'd like to think that like word would spread, that all of a sudden, like, demand is ramping up, and it's like, Yothurmiir, where is this stuff? How are you getting it? And so there's like greedy people maybe start like trying to steal it. They keep catching people trying to sneak in or something like that, or there's pressure from the government and other governments, and it's just, there's a lot of pressure. And so
what do you think is convincing the people who are kind of like the keepers of this up in ye old mountains to actually let it go? Because I assume that, like, being that that's kind of their thing, their identity is that, like, unless it was really like desperate, that they wouldn't give it out no matter what. So did they maybe suffer some sort of catastrophe themselves recently, and they're like, shit, we need food or we will die or like something like that? Like what is making them let go of even these trace amounts?
I think I like to think it was like a 10% sort of thing, and so it's not like, you know, one shot glasses remaining or anything like that. They have only ounces. I think it's probably a combination of the people truly forgetting why they perform this ritual.
Right.
It's a combination of that with the fact that, like, again, they don't have anything to actually trade with the people below. And so, you know, it's like it becomes increasingly more tempting as more and more people ask for it. Like, hey, okay, I'll give you 100 gold for it. And like, you know, maybe the first time they're like, okay, well, I'll give you a little bit, but then they come back and they're like, I'll give you 10,000 gold for it. And they're like, that's way more tempting for the same amount. And they're like, yeah, no, just whatever it takes, just give it to us. And they're like, well, okay. And like it's like the slippery slope of them slowly starting to give up more and more of this resource, less and less for the ritual, until it's too late.
Dad, I sold this. I sold the sleepy sap.
You sold the what? Yeah, exactly.
A lot of money, Dad.
Yeah. That was our only bit left. But yeah, so yeah, I like to think that it's kind of a multiple forces sort of thing, but it's slowly doing that, and yeah, maybe that's causing some political tension as well, especially because its neighbor Feros is also one of the richest nations in the land and well known for trade. So this new resource pops up, and everyone's kind of like, wow, where'd you get this? Can I have more? And so it's following the supply line back, and the pressure's falling on those people to try and supply more. So yeah, that's an excellent little sort of current event to pop into Yothurmiir. Well, that actually kind of covers cultural norms and taboos a little bit, both with the Titan and also with the dragon. I guess all of it coming down to sort of a resource management thing, but also being like a mountainous nation, like resources are going to be something they're abundant in. Yeah. But yeah, bringing up Feros, that also brings us to what nations are going to be kind of allied, neutral, or enemies of Yothurmiir.
So if I remember correctly, this like sort of peaceful Shire-esque mountain nation,
the one to the east there,
accessible a little bit, through Yothurmiir, but technically not through anywhere else, right? Unless you're taking a real treacherous path.
I'm not sure if we established exactly where that sort of little Shire area was going to pop out, but Yothurmiir makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I pictured it having, like, let's say, like, there is a small valley that leads from northern Yothurmiir up through the mountain, or I guess, like, through the mountains, and then into this area, and that's the main route. But then there's also, like, a sketchy back path, that one that the guy sold out the Spartans with, you know, the one to the Persians or whatever.
Yeah.
There's like that kind of route. Down into like the plains, like way down below. So it's like hell of a path. Nobody uses it. Probably most people forgot about it.
You're popping out in the middle of nowhere anyway, so it's like it's a treacherous path, and then it's not like you're gonna have a good time when you pop out. That could make a lot of sense.
Just so there's like technically another entrance, albeit not one that you would ever actually use. So I was just checking because for Yothurmiir, I think that they would have probably a pretty solid relationship with them, but these people out there probably don't really have much else for relations if they are basically cut off to the rest of the world.
It's a good point, and it's like, what does Yothurmiir actually have to gain from because if there's only basically one path in and no one else really seems to know, because we were saying that the Shire area, for lack of a better term, we'll come up with a name for it soon.
We'll get them at some point during the second Passover anyway. So
if their main pathway in and out of or into the world at large is basically guarded by Yothurmiir, what do they have to gain from it? Because like we said, that they have a little bit of a military that'll guard and everything like that. And
basically all of their military is put like into this valley, so the only access to it is protected, and they don't need to worry about having like patrols or like borders or anything like that, because they don't have borders. So they just chuck any few soldiers they do have into that valley, which is the only way bad things can come in.
But as such, like, Yothurmiir would also kind of be the guardians of that pathway as well. And so would Yothurmiir have anything to gain from helping them? And it's like kind of no, because it's not like there's going to be maybe there could be a ton of trade, because also this Shire area could be a great farmland.
Totally.
And also consider the fact that on the northern end of Yothurmiir, it's going to be more mountainous, because we were considering that to be dwarven country, higher elevation, longer winters.
Yeah.
And so maybe they just have a really good trade relationship food-wise.
Well, that's what I was thinking, because, like, as you go around the mountains in Yothurmiir, it becomes more farmable, more arable. But at that point, it's actually further to get from that end of Yothurmiir than it is to trade with these guys up in the Shire.
Yeah, well, that could even be a source of tension as well, because now that there's been this unification, like there's no like embargoes on the trade between them. It's the same place, and so trade could happen, and so maybe they do need less food from them, and but that was like their only economic source of anything. So there might be a tiny bit of tension. I don't see it being anything that's going to come to a boiling point. But it's something you might hear from an annoyed merchant in passing if
maybe they've also got, like, you know, secret grandmama's recipe for epic goat cheese, and nobody else does goat cheese like they do.
Dude, epic goat cheese. That's what it's called canonically.
Says so right on the package.
Yeah.
But they could have some things that they can't get elsewhere. Long story short, to say that as pretty much their one and only actual neighbor, I think they got a pretty good relationship with that.
That would make a lot of sense. Now, what brings up is its other bordering country, Fyros. Now, we were picturing a certain amount of tension between them.
Definitely.
Now, do you think there's been wars in the past?
Yes.
Yes, definitely? Okay. That would make a lot of sense, considering the human population of Yothurmiir kind of was originally sprouted up from Fyros, and so borders might have changed in history.
Yeah, I think that at the time we're talking about now, this window of time, they are at peace, but maybe it was like only within this generation or like one generation back that peace has been brokered, and there were other areas of time where they were at peace and other areas of time where they were at war. It just kind of flips back and forth, and so they're like, we're at peace now, but like for how long, kind of thing, because it might happen again.
France and England.
Yeah.
Like, but yeah, I think at this point, they should be at peace, but there's probably like a competitive tension between them. Yeah, definitely.
Well, and let's say, I don't know, that maybe feels too recent to say that it happened within this generation. Yeah. But let's say that it's like, it's memorable, like the old people in the senior citizens of both nations, especially if dwarves live longer in our world than humans do. Yeah. We'll figure it out. But the people can remember it. Like it's there, and then also if you look back in the history books, it was like back and forth.
Yeah. And so as such, there's going to be even though there's no war now, and even if there hasn't been for a while, there has, because wars have sprouted up and then down and then up and then down, like that would just bake into the population.
That it's gonna happen again at some point. We're gonna flip and then we'll flop again.
Yeah, and so it's just that, like I said, that competitive nature with each other is going to be, again, just baked in.
Totally.
Okay, so
at the moment in time, they are at peace. Yeah. And they are trading, and they are more or less working together and stuff, but like it's kind of uneasy.
I like to think a lot of the tension on the Dragon Mountains is coming from Fyros, and so that might even be another point of dangling plot point for if this was like for a game or something like that, is like the risk of war between Fyros and Yothurmiir yet again over another resource war. Especially because the mountain range is a little bit of like the path up to it is technically within Yothurmiir, but it's close enough where Fyros is like, well, if we expand our borders just a little bit, we would have access to this resource on
I don't
our own.
know. Yeah, totally. I don't know if we've ever actually shown that section of the map close enough to kind of project that point, but this mountain path that goes from, northern Yothurmiir to southern Yothurmiir, instead of going around the long mountain range, it goes right through where that big old dragon in the mountain is. The mountain range sized dragon is like this far on the map
Yeah.
from the border with Fyros.
Yeah.
So it's quite close. It's quite close.
Yeah, so that could be very easily like a primary point of tension between Fyros and Yothurmiir right now. So it's like, again, they're at peace, they're trading, things are technically going well, but it's just like, this is just, you really only need a spark to the fuel when it comes down to these two nations, and this could very well be it.
And also, like, I think probably where almost all of the conflict has happened in the past is like in southern Yothurmiir, where Fyros is kind of like the master of the plains and the riverlands kind of thing, and the most southern part of Yothurmiir is kind of flat, and there's a river and stuff, like the elevation begins to increase, but they could be like, hey, well, our population is still expanding, and this kind of looks like our thing, so like, why shouldn't it be ours?
Yeah, definitely.
It was technically at one point kind of debatably.
I do like to think that sort of, like, the probably next few hundred kilometers or so, like, into Yothurmiir now is Yothurmiir, but I like to think that area has been in flux as a border over time, and so there is always that possibility.
Yeah, looking at the borders there, despite the fact that I think kind of where the border is now is more or less where the elevation does begin to slowly climb. It's like this section, you back and forth, like the distance of, the current border to, or where like this pathway is kind of like the middle of which territories have shifted hands. You know what I mean? Yeah. So there's like a little strip right there that is currently being held by Yothurmiir that has shifted back and forth multiple times.
Yeah, and so there's always the possibility that it can do that again.
And that also creates a sentiment on both sides that they're like, well, that's ours.
Yeah.
Let's get it back.
Yeah, exactly. Or that's ours, you can't take it.
Exactly.
And so that's just perfect. Continuing, so Fyros, that's pretty well established.
Yeah.
Over in our sort of Cowboy Plains Mongolian area, I feel like it's going to be not such a non-issue.
Yeah, they're pretty much irrelevant to Yothurmiir, I think, because, like, I mean, you can call it friendly, but more than anything, it's like a forgettable relationship with them, because they don't need to have any run-ins with them.
Well, they're also such a small area. Yeah, you know what I mean?
Down there, they're minding their own business, and they're not probably actively trading much. Yeah. They're just kind of, they're a live-in-the-moment type of people down there.
Yeah, exactly.
They're not all about, hey, let's collect gemstones and let's trade our epic goat cheese. They're just riding around, living. Livin.
Yeah. So, okay, moving up. We also have our sort of foresty elf area on the same continent.
Yep.
That I like to think is pretty neutral.
Yeah.
There's just nothing to really fight over. It's just
They're
not a comfortable area for the dwarves. The elves have no reason to, unless
they don't share borders or anything like that, so it can't really be all that bad. Because it's not like either of them are going to be fighting at sea or fighting on land or anything like that, so they don't really have a reason to have a bad relationship. And I think even like historically speaking, the elven area down here has more to do with the elven area on the other end of, or like the other continent here, rather than, for the most part, anything to do with anyone on this continent.
Well, really. And also, since it's such a forested area and the elves are kind of sort of a semi-mystical and also kind of a keep to themselves sort of people. Because we were picturing these more as like wood elves, really, than any sort of like high elf or anything like that. So any war that might have happened is going to be from someone encroaching on them, not the reverse. Because I think they will stay within their forest and their area because they consider that land sacred. But there's not a reason to expand. Like there's no motivation for that. So I think that would be pretty neutral.
Yeah, agreed. And then there's the swamplands.
Nobody likes them.
Nobody likes them. There's not, as far as I know, really like a government even there for the most part.
Yeah, it is a relatively barbaric and savage land. If any war is being declared, it's by a warlord and not like an actual governing body.
Totally. So like not any actual relationship, but also not a good one. Yeah. Because the things there would fight you if they saw you, but it's not personal.
Yeah, no, exactly. And so that kind of covers that.
Yeah. And then...
sorry? Well, I was just going to move on to the desert area.
That's how Canadians do it. Let's move on to damn. Let's move on to the desert area.
Yeah. So now we're reaching into cross ocean sort of areas.
Now, Yothurmiir is not necessarily big on ocean travel because they don't have much connection to the ocean. Like, most of it's like cliff sides.
Yeah, or just like generally, like, yeah, Scotland sure has a lot of coastline.
Yeah,
but it's really not known for its seafaring nature. Yeah,
yacht clubs and stuff like that.
Yeah, and it's overly abundant navy. Like,
so I think that they probably have some shipping and trading themselves. I think a lot of it's going to go through Fyros, but they could do it. And I think that more than likely anything they have to do with the ocean is like fishing for like the local village. Like a handful of fishermen will make their way down the rocks in the morning and then come back or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. And so like they probably have some level of navy and stuff like that. But again, it's not going to be such a primary piece because also it's not. The likelihood anyone is actually going to invade them navally is also pretty low. Again, just geographically, it's not going to make any sense.
Yeah, they got a lot of space. So, like, somebody could hop off their boats and come in and be like, this land is our land now. And it's like, oh, we didn't even notice you. Like, come over to our cities and we'll beat your ass about it.
Yeah, exactly.
So I don't think that they have probably negative relations across the ocean minus... Pirates. Like the pirate guys.
Yeah.
And then I think maybe a varying relationship with certain city-states there.
Yeah.
That's kind of on a neither here nor there level.
I do picture probably Yothurmiir being a good place for ships to stop from the Triplet cities going down to Fyros.
That's a good point.
It's kind of
that's a good point.
Especially because once you get down to sort of the halfway point between the Triplet cities and Fyros, like Yothurmiir's so big that it covers that whole distance.
Yeah.
And so in the areas that are more down into the grasslands of Yothurmiir rather than the mountains, there might be a few more ports that are considered like, hey, this is the halfway point.
True.
This is a good, there's trade there made for sure, but it's more in the fact that it's like, hey, we're stopping here, we'll trade some goods to actually like, we need rations, we need this, that, and the other thing, and they will continue. But again, it's that sort of medium level. It's not going to be anything like Fyros, where it's like it's their cities like committed to the port.
Yeah, I think probably all three of the Triplet cities are going to have overall positive relationships with them, and then the city-states themselves are going to kind of be a little bit more varied, but also none of them so severely that it's super important.
Yeah, definitely. How do you think the kingdom prior to the city-states fracturing would have had? Because that could be important historically.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think potentially, like, historically, negative.
Yeah.
Because, like, they're not so terribly far away, and they are very resource-rich. So if they wanted something, they could go over and take it, because they were powerful.
Yeah.
Back in the Ye Olden times.
Yeah, definitely.
And that was probably also the same kind of Ye Olden times that Yothurmiir was kingdoms of human and kingdoms of dwarf, so they're a little bit also less powerful and therefore easier to bully around.
Yeah, fair enough. No, that I would agree with that. That would make a lot of sense, definitely. I think that covers like most of the important sort of areas.
There's also this like the wealthy desert nation itself. I think is going to have kind of a similar to the Triplet cities, except maybe even a little less. Because they're probably going to be doing most of their business up in like the city-states.
And they are also closer to Fyros. Yeah,
so they don't need to stop. But if these like port cities in Yothurmiir are decent enough trading locations, then I think that they would stop there and have good relationships.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a certain amount of tension on the sort of wealthy desert nation. Because even if they're not overtly at war for any particular reason, there's going to be a lot of tension on, you guys need to get the pirates in check because they are harassing our people.
Yes, that's true.
And I feel like nations will hold that desert nation responsible because they are from there. And so it's like, there's going to be a certain amount of tension that way, but I don't think it's not something to declare war over. It's something to be diplomatic over.
For sure.
And so like you say, like not as as good as the triplet cities, because the triplet cities, I think, are going to be they're going to be a very well-liked set of people, other than I think the other city-states because of history.
Yes.
But like everything across the water like doesn't have any reason to dislike them, and trade is going to be plentiful with them, and so that's going to be a good thing. So it's going to be that, but like less, just because of, again, the tension that the country really doesn't have a ton of control over, but it's still kind of their responsibility.
Agreed.
So,
and then the only other people to talk about are kind of these, like the two different tribes in Ye Olde and Elven Jungle over there, but they don't really do anything, like other than stay in their own kind of zone.
Yeah, I think it's going to be something that Yothurmiir's not even going to think about
Pretty
twice.
negligible. Yeah.
So they can kind of remain in that. And then everything, obviously, to the west here is going to be, not even a nation technically at this point. So that leads to, that clears up sort of allies, enemies, and stuff like that.
I think one thing worth talking about is, what do you think that, like, sort of in the grand scheme of things, how, like, wealthy and developed would you call them, like, on a scale from 1 to 10? Like,
well,
if...
It depends on where you would put Fyros, because Fyros I consider to be likely the most wealthy nation in the world.
I agree, like, overall. I think that, like, if you look at this one city left in the desert, that maybe there is more density of wealth, but that Fyros, like, being so big and sprawling, is probably the most, like, wealthy overall. So let's say that Fyros is, like, let's call it a 9 on the wealthy / development overall index, and that the jungle tribes or even this, like, sort of Mongolian-esque plains over here is, like, to the lower end of the scale. Like,
well, I would say the swamp is probably the least.
Swamp is a straight up 0.
Yeah, if you had to make it a 1, it would be a 1.
Yeah,
I would think that on this map, Fyros would be the top, and then it's going to depend on how you slice it between the desert nation and Yothurmiir, because, like you say, there's going to be a lot of wealth density in that desert nation, but it's also, like, realistically a big tsunami will wipe you guys out.
Yeah.
Like there's such a small sort of area, so it's like realistically, can you call that, even with the same amount of money? It's like
the, like, GDP of the like this desert place is high, but there's less money there overall than other places because there's way more empty country.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think Yothurmiir technically would be the second most powerful nation in the world, monetarily. But again, it really depends on exactly how you're measuring the wealth. But I think considering, like, how large Yothurmiir is also geographically, and how many unique resources it's kind of garnering, I think I would put it at second.
I think so. I've got kind of a question in the same vein, because they're overall, like, quite developed and well realized. What do you think it kind of looks like on the less wealthy side of things? Like, what do small towns here look like?
I don't think there's going to be a lot of squalor, or anything like that, or, like, levels of serious poverty, because I think there's enough land that there's definitely enough for everyone. It's going to be one of those instances where, like, you have your kids and stuff like that, but there's enough unclaimed land still within this place that all of them go out, kind of claim some property and build their house and homestead there, and then, like, things continue like that. And so the very poorest of these people is likely still going to have a decent amount of land to work with, and probably their own resources within which.
So we're talking, like, cute little hamlets with ivy growing up their walls versus, like, old ladies wearing sheets smacking dirt off of their cats with a stick kind of, like, vibe in the small town.
Yeah, definitely. And so, like, obviously, like, you know, there's going to be poor people just because, like,
for sure, but that's how it goes.
Just,
but I think the sort of, like, vibe of what the small towns looks and feels like is a really good way to see what the actual, like, wealth and development of a place is.
Yeah, on the lower end of the wealth scale rather than the higher end. What's the baseline?
Yeah, if you go to small town and that's all it is old lady beating cat with stick to clean it, is, like, that gives you a better idea of what it's like than, you know.
Well, then, like a small town where everyone's fighting over the small amount that they have because there's nothing there.
Yeah, if you walk past and it looks like that scene in Monty Python, The Holy Grail, that's low wealth and development.
Yeah.
But if you walk past and it's just a cute little, like, Romeo and Juliet
Hamlet little
scene,
place. Yeah, I kind of picture it being more like that, and so there's not like a level of bring out your dad.
Yeah.
So yeah, like Yothurmiir is definitely like a place where even the poor would be like, okay.
Yeah.
You'll have your struggles, your
but easily survivable for anybody.
For the most part, until your kid gets taken by a griffin. But
fair.
Like it's not like this place isn't dangerous, and there's but most of your problems would be the world around you rather than your lack of resources and ability to put food on the table.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I see the very baseline of the economic tree sort of ending up for Yothurmiir.
For sure.
And then when you get into the big cities, if you picture I think most of them are going to look like castles or forts, like cities that have walls and then another wall, or like a castle that's like kind of the center of town. I think it's going to be a lot of that, because considering that these were two warring nations for a very long time, those sort of outposts would end up being someplace that's very the population would gravitate to,
being behind walls for security.
Exactly. And so as such, I think a lot of the larger cities, regardless of where they are or who they were aligned with originally, are going to be very much like that. Again, like sort of a European sort of feel, and a lot of the places are going to be built around like a fort or maybe some sort of landmark that was very important. So very well defendable. I see a lot of Yothurmiir being, but so that kind of handles the economic a little bit. So we've covered allies and enemies, economic status and development. For the most part, a handful of cultural norms and taboos, at least in certain local areas.
Leadership and government we talked about pretty heavily.
Yeah, pretty heavily in the last one. It's going to be a pretty definitive royal line. Important history and current events, we've kind of covered a certain amount that we need to. And I think, the general vibe has been pretty well established.
For sure, I agree.
So now we just need to top off Yothurmiir with a flag.
Nice.
So I think something that we're going to do to kind of top off each of these areas as we give them a little bit enough of an identity for us to come back to in a little bit, is we're going to add a flag to each of the ones that might have them. This one, I think we had a few ideas that we were tossing around already.
We had some kind of like ideas for it. We definitely want there to be a pretty central like griffin head of some kind, probably a more typical griffin. Despite the fact that this place has many. And then other notable features that I think are going to make it into the flag are mountains. And probably some grays and blues. Maybe there's like, a mountain line and like a sky. So I think that we're probably looking at maybe a jagged line dividing the map in two.
Yeah, I think that's probably a good idea here.
Here's a quickie little tip that I'm not necessarily professional on, but here's how I feel about it. When you're designing a map for your place, you should think of the sort of elements that you're portraying in the actual nation itself and put those specific elements in one way or another into the map itself. So with Yothurmiir, for instance, we know that their big important animal, their like national animal, is a griffin. So that's going to take a central thing. A lot of people, or a lot of flags have like one central thing, be it like, Wales has like a dragon, for instance, because that was important historically.
We got a leaf.
Yeah, exactly. Canada's got a leaf.
We also have really thick strips of bacon.
On the sides, yeah, exactly. Maple bacon.
There's usually one central thing that's kind of important. In this case, a griffin.
Yeah.
And then there's a lot of design choices you can do, like if we're going to cut it in half with mountains and then have, the bottom half be gray, or maybe some grass along the bottom, because it's like, ground, mountains, sky, and that's sort of symbolic of how the actual vibe is in Yothurmiir. So you can put a lot of like imagery and vibes from what it actually is into the flag. And that's how it feels right and real for the nation.
Mm-hmm.
A handsome guy.
If it helps, you should be able to rest your palm on the screen.
That's fine. It's just, for the most part, a rough idea of what we want. And then like a nice sky blue.
Yeah.
Sir?
Sir!
Sir?
Sir! Beautiful!
You're beautiful. You're beautiful. You're beautiful. It's true. It's perfect. Look at it. Wow. Oh my god. So we have a pretty rough sketch here. We'll probably put up my hilarious drawing. But if we can, we'll make a little bit of a more refined version and put it up there as well.
Oh, you know I'm putting up your version.
Whether I like it or not.
But that's
why I'm the editor.
Yeah.
Who put you in charge of that stuff? Yeah, so that's kind of the basic idea anyway behind the flag for this place.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, it will be more refined eventually.
Yeah.
But that's kind of the idea of it.
Oh, actually, one thing I did want to add to it was the... I wanted to add the Celtic knot somehow. Because remember, the Celtic knot's going to represent...
Indeed.
Yeah, so how would we add that in here?
We can figure that out later and put it in the refined version.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, we can do it that way. Let's see, how many did we have? 8 cross points. So that's all we really
put it
use
horizontally and made that the grass. Do it in green.
Interesting.
Put it horizontal, make it the grass.
Make it the grass?
Make it the grass.
Make it the grass. Yeah, it might not be a bad idea. But yeah, we can swing that. But either way, we had some pretty basic ideas already kind of bouncing around in our heads on this flag. There might be a little bit more discussion in future ones, but this one's felt pretty simple because it's represented very well by just visually easy, and it has like its own animal and everything.
Yeah.
So, but all right, so I think that's going to wrap up Yothurmiir until we actually want to dig into the hyper specifics.
Yeah. Which we will eventually, but we're going to kind of give everywhere a proper actual once over for this pass, where we get at the very least all the things we talked about today, and then make them all a flag and make sure that they're all named at this point before we start getting into the hyper details.
Exactly. We've been playing with a lot of theoretics on when it comes down to like what we call places. We named Firos and Yothurmiir just to add a little bit of something to places, but yeah, we'll give them names so that it's a little bit less confusing for you guys as we go, and the second pass we'll nail that down so that it'll be ready. So either way,
cool.
Yeah, that's
in that case, thanks for watching. We'll see you in the end card.
Catch you later. Hey there, welcome to the end card. Thanks for watching the episode. Remember to like and subscribe, and check us out on our Instagram, and you can also listen on Spotify if that's also kind of more your thing. But we have a few comments to get through for today. We've gotten quite a few comments actually since the last video.
Yeah.
It's been actually really cool to see.
We posted that video of asking people how they feel about dungeon masters fudging their rolls. People have opinions.
People do indeed. And definitely some of my favorite comments.
There were some funny ones. Yeah, thanks for everybody who commented on that. That was fun to go through and read.
Yeah. Dr. Shrike says, my dumbass PCs constantly prove that changing roles is necessary. You know what? Some parties are just gonna be like that, man. Yeah. Especially if you have a party of shit disturbers. Sometimes you're just like, man, I don't want to kill you. Just you guys are constantly doing this.
Or you could kill them out of spite.
Yeah, you could kill them to send a message.
Just don't.
Absolutely. It's not about the money. It's about sending a message. So thank you, Dr. Shrike.
Oh no. Oh,
did you lose it? This is kind of the first instance where we're actually having to like scroll and find comments where we're like, oh God, where'd it go? So thank you again. Like, this is such a cool thing.
To be honest, I'm expecting a cut, because this is...
There's no cuts in the end card.
Cut the end card! Cut the end card!
Please. Please.
I mean, if it takes that long, then I might, but I'd
Yeah.
like to leave these sections as unedited as possible.
Found it.
Okay, good.
Okay, if we cut, we can come back here. If we didn't cut... Sorry.
I think we probably should.
I think we probably should.
You can probably have the first little half of that. That was funny. But yeah.
Beep. Okay. I've got one here from Chris Stewart 4549. Thanks for commenting, Chris Stewart. It says, I love my character, but I'm the ride or die category. Every now and then you just have to step back and ask what makes for a great story. Amen. Also, it's important to... The moral of the story is you should, in your session 0, specify with your players like what they can expect. And also for you to get kind of a feeling on what they want out of the story, because the end goal is a great story. And if they are willing to sacrifice some of their hard-earned work on making these characters for the great story, that's awesome. That's personally what I'm into as well. But if they like the other style, then you should know that, and maybe then you should fudge some rolls.
Yeah.
But as long as everybody knows and you talk about it, then it doesn't really matter to me.
Yeah, exactly. Well, this is the thing too. Is I think a distinctly different goal is actually kind of the difference. Is
Totally.
whether you want to make a great story. Is something where if you're going into that and everyone agrees with that, I feel like those types of players are more willing to let a death happen because it can also have it can jumpstart character development in the other characters.
Absolutely.
And so it can create that. Whereas if this is a little bit more of a, you know, I really like this character and I just want to have fun with this, and everyone's kind of on that page.
Yeah.
Trying to make sure they don't die.
Yeah.
Is totally okay.
Yeah.
But also, God knows the RNG can be so bad sometimes that even if you subtract a few crits or good rolls here or there, or have them succeed some saving throws, sometimes they are just bound to die.
Yep.
And hey, sometimes when the goal is just to have fun, sometimes you'll just throw a character into the fire and watch them die for funsies as well. But it's all about the expectation. Exactly. Definitely.
But thank you, Chris Stewart 4549. Appreciate you commenting.
Thanks. We have one from Vidcap Baker 7588. I don't fudge the rolls. I'm just bad at math. I feel that.
That's real.
I feel that way too hard. We play D&D often at like the end of the day and always after work for all of us. Yeah. And actually, no, you have those days off, don't you? Who knows?
I don't remember when or not I work.
Yeah.
I turn off my brain.
Yeah, I don't work.
I've never worked a day in my life. I just completely turn my brain off. You never work a day in your life if you don't pay any attention.
If you disassociate, you'll never work a day in your life.
Amen.
But nonetheless, yeah, it's always at the end of the day and closer to our bedtime, and so there's many moments where it's the last half hour, and I'm like, what's 17 plus 2? 16? Fuck. It's an absolute killer to be sleep deprived during D&D. But yeah, thank you, Vidcap Baker. That one cracked me up quite a bit when I read it.
I've got one here from Allomancer, which, by the way, love the name, love the profile picture. That's hilarious. Thank you for commenting. They say, nice balanced perspective. I respect DMs who always roll in front of the table, but I don't think I could be one with the party I have.
I'm starting to sense a theme.
Sorry about your party, Allomancer. But no, seriously, for real, like if they're straight goofing, sometimes you gotta show them a little bit of mercy. And then you still get the great story because they're goofing and they don't suffer and cry in despair because of it. You're just having fun. It's a game. It's fun. I will say, the one reason why I actually don't roll in front of the table, I just mentioned this off screen actually while we were talking about this, is because I hide my rolls behind the screen so that they don't know necessarily like, oh, so it has a +7 wisdom saving throw, so therefore we have to stop using our wisdom. I keep a little bit of stuff secret so that there's a little bit less unintentional metagaming.
Yeah, it's more for the modifiers rather than the rolls.
Totally.
Yeah, no, that does make a lot of sense too. And I think I see in the comments here too, and I've just heard about in general, like some things will be open roll and some things will be behind.
Yeah.
Like it's so good to have those sort of perspectives or practices rather that where you have certain things where you want to set a precedent for things being out in the open, but also just as this is a game of numbers and a game of chance, you do have to kind of hide some stuff behind the screen. And this is the thing as a DM, is it is all up to you and your playstyle. It's such an important thing. And this one thing this sort of short has really shown is like the huge variety in how people choose to play these sorts of things. Completely open role versus behind the screen, but for reasons, or like I absolutely fudge rolls constantly because I want things to go, well, or at least have enough tension or certain things like that. Like everyone's got, it's such a, you can be anywhere from 0 to 100% on this opinion. It's so not black and white, and that's what I love about this.
Well, the DMG is more what you call guidelines than actual rules.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
But anyway, thank you to everybody who was leaving comments and likes and just watching our stuff. It's been a lot of fun to engage with our viewers, and yeah, it's been a blast. So thanks for commenting. Please feel free to toss a comment in this one as well, and we'll try our best to respond, or at the very least, we'll give it a read, and I'll probably end up commenting back. So see you around. Have a good night.
Catch you later.